this wonderful, wonderful row of faces. Thank you everyone for showing up. I appreciate it. I'm going to let the ladies introduce themselves. We are, at this point, making up about 8% of the VR, AR industry, and there are lots of great organizations out there that are helping to push for gender parity and diversity and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna go down the road, let you guys introduce yourself. I'm gonna ask you your name, company, and then an example of a specific project or a focus area. My name was supposed to be Louisa Spring, but it's not, so I'm the pinch hitter. I thought I could do an English accent, but I decided against it. I'll start with you, Anargia, please. Name, company, a little bit about you, and your area of focus.
Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Anargia. I am an investor at a firm called Maveron. I'm based up in San Francisco. We are a consumer-only venture capital firm, so we invest in consumer tech brands, so really hyper-focused on finding and investing in breakout consumer tech brands. I have been involved in virtual reality for about 2 years now. My first VR experience was AltSpace VR, I think in the April of 2014. And it was just me and my sister sitting at a real table, but in AltSpace VR, throwing boxes at each other. So pretty basic, but it blew my mind. And the idea that I could feel shared presence in there with her was amazing. And I've been kind of hooked ever since. At Maveron, I've done a handful of consumer VR investments. Our main focus is the Series A, but we do a lot of seed investing as well. So my involvement with VR right now is on the investing side and helping build the ecosystem of entrepreneurs, founders, and community, especially around women in VR as well.
Fabulous.
Hi, I'm Tana Frederick. I am the CEO of Feral Dog Productions, which produced Defrost, with Randall Kleiser directing, and it is a virtual reality narrative series. We went to Sundance with our pilot episode. We keep following up, and we have 12 episodes completely finished and some great actors in them. And it's a great, wonderful sci-fi sort of soap opera-ish type creative narrative tale. So I'm really happy to be here and happy to have Malia moderating.
Thank you for showing up, Dana. Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina Heller. I'm the CEO and co-founder of VR Playhouse. We are a creative studio and full-service production company that specializes in VR, AR, and I would say emerging creative technologies. We've done a lot of branded work and commercial projects over the last couple of years. A couple of standouts recently was we finally got to talk about working, being the creative team for the Lytro tech demo, Moon, that was recently released. And then also we did the flagship piece of content for the Life VR app from Time Inc. called Defying the Nazis, which was a collaboration between Ken Burns, PBS, VR Playhouse, and Time.
Awesome, thanks.
I am Alethea Avramis, and I'm the producer for Specular Theory in Venice Beach. We are a live-action VR content studio. We are mainly known for our cinematic narrative work. There's a series called Perspective, which has been at Sundance the last couple of years. There's a police brutality piece in VR, which was at Sundance this year, which is kind of really what we're known for. We also do a lot of branded content as well.
Hi, I'm Rachel Skidmore. I'm the Director of Media Development at Skybound Entertainment. I would say our first foray into VR was the series Gone for Samsung VR, directed by J.T. Petty. He's worked in video games and narrative and television. So it's a cinematic series, 11 episodes narrative, and it's a thriller with a sci-fi twist.
Thank you, Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Morey. I have a couple companies right now doing some VR and AR work, but I think I'm the VR historical survivor up here on the panel because I've been doing this since 1989 pretty consistently, and been really amazed to see how things are changing in this sort of resurgence of VR and seeing all of the kind of hearts and minds that are putting themselves at this juncture to make VR something really, really special. My companies tend to focus on a little bit more research, a little bit more meaningful VR applications. So the most recent project that I just wrapped up was creating a virtual world ecosystem for NASA for astronauts who would go on long-duration space missions, and we put it in a Mars habitat on a mountain in Hawaii where 6 scientists were locked up for a full year, and they got to use this to take virtual vacations and to stay in contact with friends and family back home through recordings of their avatars in spaces, sharing things that way when they had no synchronous communication. So we're about to publish the results of that. It looks like it did help them deal with the issues of sensory deprivation and social isolation.
Hi, my name is Catherine Day. I am the head of Unscripted at Jaunt VR. So I do a lot of news, documentary, travel, adventure, and cause content. We've worked with ABC News a lot, Camp 4 Collective. We did a series called Home Turf. I've also done some stuff with Tastemade and Riot. And most recently, my favorite piece, I'm really excited for this to come out at the United Nations Climate Conference, is a piece with Conservation International called Amazonia.
Thanks, Catherine. So my name is Amelia Probst. I'll be kind of running the questions. Ladies, I think something so great about this row of people in front of me is that we all have kind of different backgrounds and we all have different stories about why we got here. And so whether you come from a luxury hospitality and marketing background like myself, or you have a computer science and art like Jackie down there, right there. Is it like PhDs probably in both and rocket scientists as well? Who knows? So I would love to know kind of how you guys got into this space and how you kind of navigated your way to where you are now. And so starting with kind of the VC side of things and the finance side of things, how did you get into that?
Yeah, I think how we think about it is that every few years or every half decade, every decade, we're seeing big shifts in computational platforms. And most of you saw that shift in mobile, you saw it in internet, and it went from being, let me invest in an internet company to, well, we invest in tech companies and they encompass different parts of the internet. And we saw early on that VR was potentially becoming this next computational platform, this next way to see the world, perceive the world, interact, do everything. And we believe strongly that VR will affect every single industry and every single vertical, from the B2B enterprise side, which we don't invest in, but also to the consumer side, where consumers will use VR and AR in a multitude of different ways. I think as we continue to dive deep into the industry, we spend a lot of time thinking about what that experience will look like. Will we use VR to talk to each other? Will we use it to watch movies? Will we use it to learn? I think all of those things are amazing possibilities. But as investors, we're always thinking about what are the experiences and what is the optimal hardware that will drive that consumer adoption, and what does that look like 5-10 years out, and how do we find the right founders to build that?
Awesome. Tina, as an actress kind of embracing this interesting medium of narrative and theater and acting, you kind of own things in a different way. How did you get to here?
Well, Randall and I have wanted to work together for a long time, and he so he presented me. I think I first saw the experience, which was Tuscan Garden, and I saw Claude Lelouch do it, and he was like, his mind was blown. He was like, "Mon Dieu!" And that was up at Randall's house, and then Randall came up with a script that he had written in 1968 at USC, and said, "Look, I want to do this project with you." And I being somebody who's in independent theater and in theater and independent films. I was very terrified at first by the possible consequences of the isolationism, and it just pretty much scared the crap out of me, the idea of locking yourself up and what this medium would do as far as storytelling was concerned. So so what did I do? I said, if it scares me, I'm going to do it. So I took on, so I just dove right in and started producing it, and still am doing that now. And it's been fascinating because it's actually a medium that I feel trumps theater and if used correctly, trumps theater and film, and is one of the most exciting new artistic mediums that we have at our fingertips. So that's what really gets me kind of hot about VR.
Christina, what gets you hot about VR?
Well, I think that what's really exciting about VR is the fact that it takes such a wide, diverse skill set to really pull it off. You need people from a variety of diverse backgrounds to do it well. And when, I was a documentary filmmaker and journalist throughout my 20s and was very interested in new ways to tell those kinds of stories. And my partner and co-founder had run a theater company that had been both here in LA and also in Chicago that had been devoted to new works, new productions. So no revamp of Glass Menagerie or anything like that. And so it was Sundance 2014. Shout out to New Frontiers, where we first tried the DK1 and got really excited and started learning the tech. And I remember very clearly that summer having this, I was driving back from Napa and I had this vision, and I called Ian and I was like, Ian, I just have this vision that like VR is the thing that's gonna take our whole creative network and all of our creative community from all these different walks of life and bring it together. And I just had this vision of all of us looking in the same direction, and that direction being VR. And he was like, all right. And from that point, we really just decided to drop everything we were doing and move fully into the VR space. And we've been going hard at it now for 2 years.
Fantastic. Alethea, how about you?
Yeah,
How did you get into it?
I come from a pretty traditional film background. Been doing documentaries for about a decade. I also work in Europe a lot. I'm a dual citizen of Greece, so I have a production company also has been based there and also in London. So I was kind of working back and forth and really focusing on narrative filmmaking. And it was probably about 2 years ago, I had a meeting in LA with a company that was starting to do VR. I had no idea what they were even talking about. I was like, what, that thing from the 90s? Like, what do you mean the VR is what? I mean, it was so weird to me. But I also, in my childhood, I came from a theater background, specifically in the Round. I attended Idlewild Arts Academy in high school. So we had done everything in the Round, and when I put on, I think it was like the DK2, I was like, oh my God, everything just came together in that moment. It was like you could see the whole choreograph of everything, and my love for theater in the Round and things that were choreographed or things that were also one take. I've always been super obsessed with films that are one take and everything like that. And so I was like, I have to start working in this. And so that's kind of how I first got interested into VR. But I think, to me, what's most interesting about it is just like any other art form, I think it's already challenging what it means to be human. And to me, that's the most exciting part of kind of where everything is going. I'm more interested in the kind of emotional areas that VR is taking us to.
Thanks. Rachel?
So personally, I've always had an interest in the intersection of art and technology. So I have a background in electronic art, and so I was always studying things like multimedia and interactive entertainment. And so, flash forward 2 years later, my background's mostly in digital entertainment and working with YouTubers and just working in cross-platform storytelling, and that's something that Skybound is also known for, with things like Walking Dead, taking it to as many platforms as possible, figuring out how, you take it from the show and you do something with then Telltale, the video games, telling a different story that intersects in different ways with the original material. So I think the idea that there was another platform that you could connect to an audience with in a really unique way was sort of my original fascination with the immersion. And then the opportunity with Gone really opened my eyes to what was possible, because we took this leap to create content that was creatively fulfilling and interesting, and also pushing the technology to the limits and brainstorming with our partners on helping to build the app. So it was just kind of like an all-around fantastic experience that got me hooked on what's possible.
Thanks, Rachel. And Jackie, it's almost like, how do I ask you how you got into VR when it's like Jackie is VR, period. So how did you create everything?
So my path, though, came from fine art. I mean, I've always been interested in art and science, but I ended up getting my first master's degree in fine art, and I was always trying to make artwork that brought an emotional reaction from the person who interacted with that artwork. And my master's thesis was actually looking at using the Apple II computer and mixing those very pixelated things you could do on the Apple II with photographic people, so that I would multiply print them in the darkroom. And then I started working in 3D, and I started building stuff, and I really also at the same time was making these physical assemblages. And I wanted to make them bigger and bigger, and I started designing them so that they were like rooms. And I couldn't build them because I couldn't store them anywhere. So then I started making them in 3D and showing them as stereo pairs. And then I heard about VR, and I realized that I could build these things and people could actually immerse themselves in them. I tried VR. It was very boring. I really thought it was so boring. There was something there. There was something about where it took you, but where it took you wasn't very interesting. So my goal from that time on for the next 10 years was trying to create virtual reality that was emotionally evocative, and getting that emotion in there, getting what it means to be human in the experience that you would be participating in the VR world. So I did a lot of techniques for getting that kind of emotional core to my VR works, and then I went into computer science, so I would know how to really kind of get under the hood and be able to make things. But it was really that looking at the human element, the emotional element, and realizing that this could be so much more, that this was a very powerful, as you all have said, new medium, that we could take places that we couldn't take normal media. And because we are able to put our body and our human self into these experiences. So that's where mine comes from.
Awesome. Catherine, you have an interesting background, how you wound up at Jaunt.
It's interesting only because it didn't make sense until this whole field opened up. I had about 5 different resumes before virtual reality and augmented reality started becoming a thing. Because I was trying to rectify 3 different parts of myself, which was one, I was always creative and artistic and wanted to express myself or help other people express themselves. 2, a truth seeker, journalist, conspiracy theorist, like all of the above. And then a total tech nerd and just obsessed with whatever, just remember the first time I logged onto the internet when I was 8 years old, and it was like, I imploded. I was so excited. And so I've worked in nonprofits, I've worked in music videos, documentaries, films, I've been a product manager for app companies, and a ton of different campaigns for the environment and human rights stuff. And then all of a sudden there was a company that was hiring a cause producer for VR. And I asked which resume they wanted, and they said, we'll take all 5. And it was just kind of this moment where I was like, wow, the world that I've been living into is finally here. So it's really exciting because I identify with a lot of everything everyone said.
Yeah, amazing. So we talk a lot about maybe what isn't right with diversity, not having enough representation, and I kind of want to talk about maybe something a positive, perhaps, of inclusion nowadays compared to whenever, really. And then also maybe another comment, a specific example, perhaps, of an area of opportunity where we can make progress. So as a gay woman, I feel like I have a lot of agency, and I feel like that's been a huge area of progress. And then I also feel like there's a lot of people out there that don't think that it's a thing. And we're talking just about gender disparity. It's true that we've come a long way, right? But we still have a long way to go. And there are some people that say, hey, because it's in black and white, everything looks equal. We're kind of ignoring some systemic things. So I kind of wanted to ask, what's your, like, maybe an area of good stuff for you, and then an area of opportunity or something we could work on in your experience?
Sure. I'll start with the good stuff. I think what's been promising is, so one big piece of VR that I've seen is the ability and the need to render oneself in VR. So what will your avatar look like? What will you look like in VR? And sometimes recreating the exact human form as how you would see that person in reality can be tough. So a lot of applications and companies are doing more cartoon renderings. And what's been promising thus far, and we saw this a couple weeks ago at the Oculus Connect conference, is that there is like huge diversity in being able to figure out what one person's avatar looks like. So diversity in gender, diversity in race, skin tone, hair texture, face structure, all of these things, which I thought was really promising and exciting to see that you don't have to wait a couple years to get a brown emoji or something, and it's starting from the beginning. So that was really promising to me. And I think an area that we have to continually think about is making sure that our inclusion conferences or conversations are truly inclusive. I've seen that people with different cultural backgrounds, with different perspectives on life will react very differently to VR experiences. Your upbringing, your racial and ethnic community, your gender, or the way you perceive your gender can really affect how you perceive a particular piece of content. And I'll give a personal example, which I've talked about a little bit. My husband is African American, and there is a Trayvon Martin fully immersive piece where you can kind of go through and see what happened that evening. And putting my husband in that experience was a very, very emotional and difficult moment for both of us, for him to see someone that looks like him and that could be him in a fully immersive environment. And different people will react differently, but for him it was, I think, more traumatic than it would be for someone else. And so I think being cognizant of that and always thinking about that, preempting people before they experience something, and then being very culturally aware and sensitive is something that we should continually talk about and continually discuss.
Thank you. Tana?
Well,
inclusivity, positive and negative.
I think the cool thing about VR that is way different from the film world, and having started in 3 years ago, is that there was more of a sense of teamwork. With my whole team is guys. It'd be great if I had some more women on my team, but for the most part, we're in this field, and being a pioneer of VR, there's this willingness to help and to share, and I try to focus on that, because it's not like we're in, like I said, the traditional film world where rules have been set. It's like we're discovering the rules. We're creating the rules ourselves. And that goes beyond gender. That goes beyond, it goes beyond everything. It kind of just boils down to like creating good art. And so that's what I've been trying to focus on. I mean, yeah, you can go from conference to conference and say, that things suck, or you can say, which is fair, but I just try to keep my eye on the prize, which is getting a nuke artist to finish my frigging 12 episodes. So it's something that I don't choose to ignore, but it's something that I just feel that VR is really an exciting world where males and females are coming together and sharing secrets and sharing exciting, like, we're all inventing this wheel together, and we it's a fun place to be right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Christina, what about you?
I have to say that I think that when VR came to life, it was at an interesting time. We had just come after Gamergate and things like that, and so there really was an effort right from the get-go, at least when I got on board, which was about a little over 2 years ago, to learn from the mistakes of the film industry and game industry. And as a result, there was, and Digital Hollywood can be commended for this. There was a lot of emphasis on making sure women were getting on panels and that there were women panels and things like that. So I would say it actually, VR Playhouse really benefited from having a woman as a CEO, because we were able to get speaking opportunities and things like that, because there was just sort of this excitement around making sure women's voices were heard. As far as the stuff that is difficult, I think it's more systemic about subconscious bias in business more than VR specific, and it's hard to know sometimes, I think, and maybe you guys can relate to this, how much of something is because of unconscious bias or how much of it is something in yourself that you could become better at, but I will say that I noticed that when Ian, my partner, is negotiating with clients, he has a much easier time getting bigger budgets. He gets more, that's why when I've gotten to the point where when we have a bigger, when I say bigger budgets, I mean budgets that are actually appropriate for the work we're doing. So, whenever when we need to negotiate a bigger budget, I've just started throwing Ian at it, because I've noticed that he is able to close those deals more easily than I can. Now, question though, is that because there's some sort of unconscious bias and he has that deep, low, authoritative voice, or is it because I'm not a closer? These are questions I ask myself every day.
Olivia, what about you? What do you ask yourself at night? Inclusivity from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Christina said it, I think there has been an effort right from the beginning to ensure that VR maybe expands beyond kind of where the film industry has traditionally been and where the tech industry has traditionally been in terms of inclusivity. I've told this story before, but I met with the CEO of one of the big VR gaming companies recently, and he said, I actually think that this medium is better suited to women creators and directors specifically, he said, which was so nice to hear. I mean, he just kind of brought that up. He's just because of the nature of the work and being able to empathize and being able to create from sort of this other point of view. So yeah, I've always felt like that. There's a long way to go, but I think in general, I think this effort kind of at the get-go of everything has been really positive. In terms of areas to work on, I mean, this is a personal story, kind of going off of also what you were saying about, is it this or is it that? I mean, yeah, I do notice just sort of a general business symptom of okay, I need to talk to the male person there instead of, the woman who's the producer or something, even though they're not the authority. I don't know, that's just a general sort of, I think, thing that women encounter no matter what industry they're in.
Yeah, feeling of kind of having the gatekeeper
that you're not an
role.
authority.
That
you're not an authority.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Rachel, what about you? What's been your experience kind of in inclusivity?
Yeah, I'd say that I'd echo a lot of the sentiments around the inclusivity of VR. I think it's exciting that everyone's welcome and invited, because it's a playground. We're all learning this together. We're all testing new things. And I find that the community is quite inclusive. I don't think I've run into, luckily, too many situations in which I was closed out of conversations about sort of either new technology or testing something. I find that at my company, a lot of times people are still, though, reaching out to the men, to the, and maybe that's just relationships that they have. In the technology business or in interactive entertainment, people that have been around longer than I have, but I still find that as people come in to the company, they're sort of reaching out to those men first. Luckily, internally, those people are then coming to me and inviting me into the conversations, inviting me back in to participate, and share my experiences and opinions, because, quite frankly, it's sort of a similar situation. I'm the producer out in the field, and so I've tested the cameras, or I've talked with these developers about how to execute on something. And so I think it's just staying with it. And I just hope that we continue to invite more women in. And I think we do that as women, and I think that we encourage our male colleagues and others to just to keep an open mind and keep an open door policy.
Totally. Jackie, what about you? How have you seen it change? How's it gotten better? Maybe there's some things that are glaring opportunities.
Well, I'm going to say we are at a very big cusp right now, because what is happening with VR is that we are trying to recapitulate and squeeze it into old media formulas, old media structures, old media hierarchies, old media everything. And we see lots of people from existing media companies that are trying to retool themselves to be VR companies. They're bringing all their baggage with them. And I think this is a problem that not having women on is not the main thing. The problem is that we are not letting VR become the medium that it could be. And in my research, and if you want to read my dissertation, it's out there on mori.org, I did a very deep survey of the first 100 really amazing VR pieces that came out between 1985 and 2005, back when you could actually count the VR experiences. And there were about 100 of them that were really, really amazing. We're just getting to some of that complexity now in this resurgence of VR. Well, 70% were done by women. And this is not a well-known thing, but I believe that this is a medium in its full affordances that is specifically suited to a female mentality. Females have, somebody said empathy, but they also tend to create a space where people can find their own way, find their own strengths. They do this with children. And I think that this medium, you have to give up some of the authoritative authoring to let it become what it's going to be. And I think that, and I'm going to predict this, that we're going to find our first amazing VR director that'll be a woman. Our D.W. Griffith of VR will be a woman, because it is a different way of thinking, and right now we're just trying to squeeze it into old mentality. I also want to say there's one other thing I think is pretty bad right now, and that's ageism in VR. So I have never been able to get any funding, being a woman and being older, even though I have 25 years of experience. And I don't understand that, because I can bring so much to the table. I think we need to do more things where we have we have collaboration between the people who've done it before and the people who are coming up, and I try to do that to let people come into my life and mentor them in ways that make sense to them. But I think we need more of that. We need to be more open in that realm too.
Yeah, we've got a target audience of 18 to 25-year-old male millennials, so I'll take the fifth on the rest of what needs to change over where I work. But in terms of, just in general, I think if you just look at the keynote speakers for this event here, it's all white men. If you look at this panel, it's mostly all white women.
Yeah, this is amazing that we even have this many women.
I mean, we've just got a long way to go as a society, and this is just reflective of that. I was at the White House a couple of weeks ago for South by Southwest, and it was the most diverse gathering I've ever been to, where I actually felt like a minority, and going to other gatherings that aren't that diverse after experiencing something like that, it just feels kind of fake. And I think a lot of us have ended up in this industry because we have a low tolerance for things that seem fake or that seem contrived or that seem too produced, and we like this medium because if something is inauthentic, you feel it and it doesn't rise to the top. And so, if you just look at, and I don't like to generalize too much, but if you get kind of scientific about the difference between the male and the female brain, because for millions of years as we evolved, men were largely concerned with hunting and killing. They have they have a more unique ability to specialize in something than a female does, just generally speaking. Like, you ask a man to think about something and his left frontal lobe will pulsate with activity. And if you ask a woman to think about the same thing, even if they're reaching the same conclusion about whatever you've asked them to consider, the female brain will have specks of light all over the place, like a universe. And so I think as women, we've struggled to express ourselves because we're trying to make connections between seemingly disparate things. And VR is a great medium for us because there's so much space to fill. And so I do think that whether or not a woman is the first great VR director, because you might find a man who has a brain structure that's a little bit more spherical as opposed to specialized. It doesn't really matter what body it comes in. I think what's important is that we just step back for a second here and, like you're saying, not try to force an old way of thinking into a new medium and kind of say, like, what is this medium best at doing, and try to fill up that space with layers and details and life as we experience it, not as we try to control it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you, Catherine. When we're talking about inclusivity and how to make it change, right? Like, how do we actually do something about it? What can we do wherever we are, whoever we are in our organization or in our niche? How do we kind of push things in the right direction? And I would love to know, like, kind of ideas that you guys have had, something that you've seen, something that you're doing, something that you want to do. I have a podcast, and I've had 2 of the women on this row right here on it, and I would love to have all of you on it. But, like, I try to feature women and get their voices out there and get their stories out there and to kind of hear about that. When we're talking about venture capital, right, that is, in general, whether we're talking about virtual reality, augmented reality venture capital, or we're just talking about venture capital as a whole, it's very, very strongly male. There are not a lot of women. How do you deal with that, and what kind of things can we do to help that pendulum swing as well?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A vast majority of venture capital dollars goes to male-led companies, and there's also not a lot of women in venture capital. So oftentimes, if there are companies that are building products for women or targeting women, they go largely misunderstood or completely overlooked. So I think there's PhD thesis worthy amount of speculating that can happen in this space for sure. Tangible things that I see myself doing, my colleagues doing, other friends in the venture capital world who care a lot about this. One of the biggest gaps I see in companies where the woman is a leader is a lack of kind of the network that provides the basic fundamental knowledge when it comes to that pitch meeting. So, if a male founder is coming in a pitch meeting, oftentimes he has a much better understanding of what venture capital returns are like, what are the things VCs want to hear, what is a term sheet, what should it look like, who are the other VCs you should be talking to. Just that kind of background foundational knowledge is much stronger. And I think a lot of that comes from he potentially has a network of other male VCs he can chat with and talk to and get information from. For many of my women friends in tech, I am the only VC they know. And so they'll call me and ask me, but there's only so much of me. I try to do my best to provide that information and insight and try to do it at scale through social media and whatnot. But just having that basic knowledge can make the pitch meeting go so much better. And I think there are just cultural standards that women are held to, conservatism that women are taught to have versus being more risky. So I think there's just like so many things that come up in that fundraising conversation. And I think the biggest way in which I can help and a lot of my fellow investors can help is in filling that information gap and hopefully doing it at scale. I think another way to help change that is understand that for us as consumer investors, we believe that VR is going to be mass. It is going to affect all of the consumers out there. And if we're just betting on companies that are only targeting men or young men or whatever it may be, we're going to be missing out on big billion-dollar opportunities. So we can't even, connect it to a lucrative pathway, and that we should be looking at companies that are targeting all types of people, all ages.
Thank you. Tiana?
Well, first of all, I would start off with having a male panel talk about how awesome women are in VR at every conference. Again, I don't know that It's a difficult question because I think sometimes in panels such as this where you isolate women and we talk about it can be you can be walking a very thin line, a razor's edge here, because on one hand we have all of these brilliant women sitting at this table who I would prefer to hear their experiences in VR and what brilliant things they're doing, but at the same time we're sitting here talking about the discrepancies between male and female power structures within VR. And I don't know sometimes, honestly, how helpful these panels are in because there's no panels out there that are men talking about how they feel disgruntled with not being seen. And so sometimes it's just like, well, yes, I understand, but the proof is in the pudding. And, the fact that all these women are up here is because they've done something that is they have amazing product and amazing outcomes, and they're highly intelligent. And so I have to say, I think sometimes I don't want to say the elimination of specific, pointing out specific gender discrepancies, but just focusing on the product and what women are creating and what men are creating and what we all are creating together. And that may sound
Yes, it's almost like fundamentally you wish that there wasn't a need for a women's panel in general.
Yeah, and I think that's a decision that we need to focus on too as women. Do we want the focus to be on the discrepancies, or do we want to be touting our work and what we've been doing?
Right. Christina, over at VR Playhouse, what do you guys think? What are you doing?
Well, I have one tip that I think could be helpful, which is whatever your sort of automatic bias is, flip it. So if you meet somebody and you think, oh, I think they look old, you should flip it. Oh, that's a good thing. If you see somebody who's of a different race or from a different socioeconomic class and they're interested in VR, instead of thinking, I don't know, think, oh, that's a good thing. I think that. Yeah, I think if you just do that over and over, you'll find yourself, they've never worked in VR before. They've had 30 years in healthcare. Oh, that could be a good thing. So, I think that would be one way to start, and just kind of noticing that and trying to bring in people that are from all different walks of life, all different socioeconomic classes, different countries, and different backgrounds. In fact, we just did this thing at Esalen I recognize some faces here, and what was cool about that event was just how many people there came from different backgrounds who had worked in fields other than entertainment or media, and it was interesting to hear their perspectives on how VR could influence things, and they also have access to then a broad network of people outside the ones you're usually kind of swimming with.
Yes, I think, surrounding ourselves with as many different perspectives as possible, and reminding ourselves at the end of the day we're just a bunch of meat sacks running around, right? Yeah.
Meat sacks. Yes.
Meat sacks. Alethea, what about you? And how do we change that? How do we get more diversity, more inclusion?
Well, I think just at our company, we just try and start from the ground up. We have a really diverse internship program, which I know for me, when I was first starting out, I started interning when I was 17, and that was such a amazing foundation for what I'm doing now. I interned at everything I could in entertainment, and it was because of those things. I still have relationships from those days, from supervisors or people that I worked with who I had to earn my trust and respect there, just like anything else. But I think the fact that I was given those opportunities actually took me a long way. So I've tried to remember that, and we try and hire, or I specifically try and look for female interns, and the ones that we've had so far have been so kick-ass and amazing. We actually just hired one of them. So I think just starting at that base level at the hiring process, I think is really key to building, having more female presence.
Yes, Rachel.
I guess all I could really speak about is a little of my own experience in which I learned just to speak up. And I say that because sometimes I definitely wish I could forget in a room that that I might be the only woman sitting at the table. It's like you wish in those moments you could just forget about it, stop thinking about it. And I think that there's a tendency to it can be either a person's more experienced or you just feel like diminished a little bit in the situation, that like, oh, never mind, things are moving so fast, like I don't need to give my opinion, like it's all fine, everything's taken care of. But I think we should lead by example and saying, no, I'm going to take the time to speak up about how, you know, this piece of creative makes me feel, or, you know, a suggestion I might have in terms of how things are going to work in production or logistically, to be an example for other people that might be coming up that are marginalized, either, you know, some younger women at my company, basically making sure to ask their opinions and get their feedback on things that maybe no one else is asking them.
Thank you. Jackie?
I think these are all really great suggestions, and I love the idea of all of them. The speaking up is good, but having someone there to listen or to elicit those conversations from the person who might not be as aggressive or as assertive in putting out their opinions. And I used to have this seminar that I ran, and I always invited my secretary to it, because you know what? She had some of the best insights. She'd go, well, what about this? And I'd go, you know, that's just so practical. None of us have ever thought of it. So bringing those voices in and then asking their opinions so that they feel empowered to give those ideas, which may be the exact idea you need because you haven't tapped into that particular demographic or thought process. So definitely bringing in interns from diverse ways. I think that's another really good thing for all companies to be doing. And I think we're making inroads. That's the thing. I think maybe this panel is all white women, but there's a lot of diversity that I'm seeing coming up, as opposed to maybe where it was, 20 years ago. It was amazing to me that 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it was very male-dominated, and yet these very creative pieces came out of the minds of women, even though the tables were not nearly as open as they are now. So I like that we're making inroads, and I think all these ideas can help us make even more inroads, and I look forward to this diversity happening on a scale that we might not have seen in other media.
Well, thank you for doing what you've done to push that forward. Catherine, how do we continue to push that forward?
I think more women in position of financing is a huge thing. I wanted to be a director when I was younger, and I had an EP say to me, well, why would you want to be a director if the EP with the purse strings gets to tell the director what to do? And I had a total shift in perspective at that point. I was wondering, should I have gone to business school instead of film school? So I think, if there are creatives out there who have an inclination that maybe they want to be on the business side, that should be encouraged. I think that, a lot of people that we don't think are creative are incredibly creative. I mean, for one, I've gotten super spoiled working with engineers for the last 5 years. Everybody thinks that it's like this huge meeting of two opposite worlds when engineers and creatives get together, and to me, it's the same exact thing. I mean, engineers are incredibly creative, and creatives are engineers in their own right. They're architecting a concept, and so I just think this idea of creativity being something that gets put in a corner, and somebody identifying as a creative is kind of bullshit. Like, everybody's creative. And so I think young women and people who just really feel artistic should be encouraged to get a full education when it comes to financial and economic, and it's just in creating workshops where women are invited to do things like learning Unity or Nuke or Unreal Engine. I mean, those are all things that feel kind of weird and scary to women. But I think, just in general, trying to create at the ground level things like internships and programs. I would say if you're a female in the industry and you're trying to help other women, invite them to opportunities where they can learn skills that they feel are so far away from what they're capable of doing, because it's really just a lot of rhetoric and jargon, and once you learn a couple key terms, you can start swimming.
Yeah, I found like working closely with people from different backgrounds and cross platforms and all that. It's like sometimes they ask the best questions because they don't know that it's not possible. You know what I mean? They haven't learned the rules that, we do it this way, we don't do it that way. And so they ask those questions that everyone else has already formed. Nope, that's not how we kind of do it. So I think the way that all of us kind of got into VR and why we're here, we all kind of have like maybe one fundamental thing, like what do you really want to see come alive in VR? Like, where are we going? Like, what do you really want to see happen? Like, I really want to see like therapeutic uses personally. Like, that's like my pet thing. Like, what about you? Even though you're a VC and you're the money lady, what do you really want to see happen?
Yeah, I think that so many people use multiple screens when they work, so they'll use 2 or 3, and they'll see an incredible increase in productivity. In addition to having 2 screens, sometimes you'll have a piece of paper, you'll have your phone. There's just multiple tools that people use on a daily basis. And people use different tricks for memory, like I put my keys by the mail, and therefore I know I have to take that mail out, whatever it is. And I think because VR is fully immersive, there's incredible opportunity to build these productivity systems, these work environments that are fundamentally very different from what we have today. And as we continue to grow more and more mobile, people are moving around, people are really transient, I think a headset can very quickly and easily create this amazing work environment where people feel more productive, they feel like they can have better memory tools because you can do whatever you want. You can say, I put that penguin by the beach ball and therefore I know I have to walk the dog, whatever it is. So I think there's just an amazing way to be able to create these environments for yourself and to find a place that makes you truly productive and happy in whatever you're working on.
Awesome. Tana, what about you?
I look forward to seeing the first films starting to come out in VR, and a continuation of emerging narrative filmmakers who are not just using the tech for the tech, but using the artistic material to justify the tech, where it's not superfluous. And I think that's going to be a really, really exciting world once, for our 12 episodes, kids now can stay immersed in a headset for an hour and a half. And so I think there's a call to artists here to be making really good films. And I look forward to seeing and encouraging and helping other people with their ideas as far as VR and film.
Yes. Christina, what do you want to see come alive?
I kind of 2 areas. One we were talking about, which was VR for better living. The idea that that experiencing things inside of virtual reality will enhance your actual life and make your actual life better. So maybe that's engaging in safe simulated environments, playing with ideas of gender or social interaction that can then empower you to try them in your real life. We were talking about how huge it would be for somebody in a country that's extremely restrictive about homosexuality to be able to play with gender identity in a safe environment where they couldn't get in trouble, and then how that could be very revolutionary. So I'm excited about, like I said, beautiful, transcendent, exciting VR experiences that enhance our actual reality, don't just create an escape. I'm also really excited about the idea of taking the World Wide Web, which right now to me looks very flat, and making it look more like the real world, which is 3-dimensional and explorable. And I think we're starting to see that the very beginnings of web VR, but I think as that develops, imagine exploring the World Wide Web, but with your hands and feet and in physical environments. So that gets me excited.
Yes. Alethea, what about you?
I think I'm most excited to see just how the language of VR is going to play out and seeing how it's going to play out. I mean, I still think we're still like in the really early days, like the early days of film, where they would put a camera down in front of a theater stage and they would just film the play. You know, that's kind of where I feel like VR is kind of like still kind of in that stage. I mean, what are the tools that are going to be like the close-up of VR, what's going to be like these editing techniques. I mean, our editor showed me something the other day. He found a really cool like VR transition, and we were like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. You know, it's like the language is being written. So I'm really interested to see, just from a creative standpoint and like a narrative standpoint, like how is all of that going to play out, like technically.
Awesome. Rachel?
My gosh, everything. Everything's exciting. I think the use of mixed, I guess, MR for educational purposes is really, really exciting. I think we don't even know. We haven't even scratched the surface, and I think it's going to be incredible where we can take that and who we can educate. And I love the idea of providing experiences, whether those are, we've already seen a lot of like travelogue type experiences, but even more so, the idea of giving people who might be, they're either in the hospital or they're bedridden or they're, homebound, giving them an opportunity to live a better life is really cool and I think exciting. So.
Jackie?
Well, I agree with all of these things, but I'm going to make a call for what I'm going to call high art in VR. Because just as film started with that camera being put in front of a theater stage, and we now have films that are just so amazing, and they are pure art. We can get that in VR, but I don't believe that in this rush to the bottom line, anybody's working on what I call these sort of experiential, immersive, embodied art forms. And until we get some people doing that, we're not going to see the full potential. The language is being written, but you need people to go really out on a limb and try things, and we always call that art. When it's experimental, we call it art, and then some of the things rise to the top. I want the Mona Lisa of VR.
Catherine, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, to finalize, and we're going to go down really quickly, and everyone's going to state who they are and then where we can find you, right? So Catherine, and then we'll go around.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I would piggyback on the high art by saying and high music as well, or sonic, spatial, audio. Yeah,
all sensory.
All sensors. I'm really excited about room scale and 6 degrees of freedom, and I guess piggybacking on what Christina said, it's largely been a B2B industry and a B2C industry, but moving into this C2C realm with all the new tools and softwares and hardwares that are coming out for consumers to be able to connect virtually is really exciting. And then lastly, live VR is, I think, going to be one of the most exciting applications for the medium as well. Being able to transport people either virtually or holographically is going to be incredible.
Yes, awesome. Malia Probst, you can find me on Twitter at the Malia. I'm Director of Brand Development for VR Scout.
Anargia Vardana. You can also find me on Twitter, which will lead you to my Snapchat and other channels. My name is spelled ANARGHYA. If you look me up on the Mavron website, you can find me there as well.
Tana Frederick, and you should go to defrostvr.com and check it out.
Christina Heller at VR Playhouse.
Alethea, ALETHEA, at speculartheory.com. And if you want to check out our work, we just launched an app recently. It's on the Gear VR store.
Rachel Skidmore. You can find everything we're doing at Skybound or skybound.com. And then I'm at I am Rachel Who.
Wow, I think I'm everywhere, but you can see some of the work at alltheseworldsllc.com and some of my personal art stuff at mori.org.
It's actually my last day at Jaunt, so I would say go to LinkedIn for the next 24 hours. But my name's Catherine Day, and you can find me at LinkedIn /in/Catherine Day or Hey Catherine Day at Twitter.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Malia.